He continues the formation of the world, how the whole world is formed, how emptiness arises, movement from luminosity, obstruction is established, that which is gold and precious is luminous awareness establishing firmness. Therefore there is the golden wheel that upholds the land. When firm awareness forms the precious moving, luminosity gives rise to wind. When wind and gold rub against each other, firelight appears, possessing the nature of transformation. The precious luminosity gives rise to moisture. Firelight steams upward, therefore there is the water wheel that contains the 10 directions. Fire and water descend, interacting, they generate firmness. The moist becomes the vast ocean, the dry becomes continents and sandbanks. For this reason, within the great ocean, firelight constantly arises. Within the continents, rivers and streams constantly flow. When the force of water is weaker than that of fire, it congeals into high mountains. Therefore, when mountain rocks are struck, they produce flame, and when melted, they become water. When the force of earth is weaker than that of water, it is drawn out as grasses and trees. Therefore, when forests and groves encounter fire, they become earth, and when crushed and pressed, they become water. Through this intermingled delusions arising and giving birth to one another in succession, they mutually serve as causes and seeds. Through such causes and conditions, the world continues in succession. Purna asks, they were all empty space. And how come mountains, rivers, and the great earth arise? So the Buddha explained. He said it was originally empty space without anything in it because of the deluded thoughts create movement. Even the empty space can move. As soon as it moves, that's called wind. The wind wheel of the wind arises first. That's how Sakyamuni Buddha explained how the mountains, earth appear. Originally, it's just empty space. And because of a deluded thought, it moves. And it would generate wind. And that's the wheel of the wind that appears first. And then the wheel of the wind and the empty space are moving each other. Then things start to appear. That's the wheel of the gold or golden wheel, which is rather heavier. Like what we say, the Uji gives birth to Taiji, Taiji gives birth to the duality, and then gives rise to the 4 forms, that gives rise to the 5 elements, and gives rise to the 6 aggregates, that gives rise to 7 zeng, that gives rise to 8 trigrams, that gives rise to 9 palaces, that gives rise to the 10 great tonic. That's just my own addition there. That's spoken in Taoism. So Sakyamuni Buddha said, first is the empty space. And when it moves, it would generate wind. So the wheel of the wind arises first. When the wind and the empty space rub against each other, then there's a separation of the heaven and the earth. There arises the golden wheel, which is the great earth. So the golden wheel gives rise to the land. And then the gold or the earth and the wind can also rub against each other. And by doing so, the firelight appears. So that's the wheel of fire appearing. First is the empty space, and then the wheel of the wind, and then the wheel of the earth, and then the wheel of the fire. And then the dry would become the mountains, and the moist would become water. that becomes the wheel of the water. And the light water would ascend and the heavy water would descend to become the great ocean. So water becomes ocean and rivers on the great earth. And because of this, in the ocean there's also the light of fire. On the continents and sandbanks, there are also rivers and streams. Rivers and the earth together would generate trees. So that's wood, and that would make up the 5 elements. The rocks on the mountains. So if you strike 2 rocks together, it would produce fire sparks and therefore produce a flame. When the earth and water combine, they would generate trees. When the trees encounter fire, they would become earth, and they can also become water. This mutual intermingled flowing each other mutually, they generate the world. So in principle, Sakyamuni Buddha says that the world arises due to the arising of the empty space and the wind wheel. And because the empty space moves, there's the wind wheel. And then when the wind wheel rubs against empty space, it generates the fire wheel. When the fire ascends, it becomes high mountains. The harder fire would becomes the earth and high mountains. The cooler fire becomes water. That's why on the earth there are rivers that becomes oceans. And because of this water and the earth, there are trees. And then that would make up the whole world. So the great earth is ever-changing and arising and disappearing. That's what the Buddha said. So Purna asks, it's all started with the empty space, so where did the mountains, rivers, and the great earth come from? So Sakyamuni Buddha explained it this way. The wheel of the space that moves and generates the wheel of the wind. And when the wheel of the wind rubs against the wheel of the space, that generates the wheel of fire. And the dry fire becomes mountains and earth. The moist fire becomes water. So the wheel of water appears. And when the earth and water rub against each other, they generate trees. That's what the Buddha says. Sakyamuni Buddha was incredible. And he could talk about it this way. About the earth, water, fire, wind, and space. He had such a knowledge 2,600 years ago. How the earth was formed, you can just read Sakyamuni Buddha's books. The same with the human body. Inside the human body, they are earth, water, fire, wind, and space. When the 4 elements are in balance and harmonized, then you're healthy. If they're out of balance, then you're sick. If you have the great fire, then you have fever. If you have too much water, then you would be swollen. When the earth has changed, then you would be limping and pain here and there. That's due to the earth problem and the wind. When your breathing is wrong, then you have problems with your lungs. When the 4 elements are in disharmony, then you would be sick. When they're in good harmony, then you're healthy. So they give rise to each other and they subdue each other. So the generation cycle of the 5 elements, or the destructive cycle of the 5 elements. The things in this world, like what I said yesterday, don't need to be so attached or so afflicted, or so troubled. There's no use. That's how it is. Even if you have a hang up or grasping, there's no use. That's how it is. And at the end, it's all empty. So you can't blame me, I can't blame you. That's how it is. So just let it be. Don't be mad. Just be happy and live. If you need to hibernate in the winter time, then hibernate. If you need to work, then work. Do something meaningful every day. Don't create too much karma. Don't create karma. Abide by the precepts. That's all about human life if you see through it. What things trouble you? Just let it be. Remember, everyone, follow your heart's desire without crossing the line. Don't create karma. Then that's good enough. You can do what you wish, but not to create karma, not to go over the boundary. That means you don't create karma. Issues about AI, I don't know, I have not studied it. Up till now, I still don't know. AI is artificial intelligence, right? You can create a robot and give them intelligence. But AI is still not like a human. A human has a spirit. A spirit, a soul. Does AI have that? Have a spirit or a soul? Then AI can create karma too. But if AI has not spirit, does not have spirit, and just have the intelligence injected to it, then they don't create any karma. They have no spirituality. Now the question is, if one creates a really evil robot or AI, you can create a good AI and give them good intelligence. But the question is, if in the future there's an evil human that creates lots of evil robots and evil AI, how would they be regulated? So can you execute those robots? So why don't you find your own way, Master Lian Shi? Om Mani Padme Hum.